Welcome to the Armed Historian Podcast. I am Cameron, the Armed Historian. You can find me on Instagram at armed_historian. This is episode 1. Episode 1. Belisarius, Knowing Your Limitations. Part 1. Genesis. Belisarius served the Eastern Roman Empire in the early and mid-6th century. The empire had survived the chaos of the 5th century and was continuing to navigate the changing landscape of a post-Roman Mediterranean. The empire had been stabilized and held a threatened but strong position in the Eastern Mediterranean. Facing increasing pressure, Emperor Justinian I began seeking new opportunities for expansion. The empire at this point was still a Romanized institution, not yet a Greek one. This is because when Constantine the Great refounded Byzantium as Constantinople, Constantine's city, in 330 AD. When he did that, much of the Latin-speaking aristocracy of the empire, particularly that of Rome, moved to the city to take advantage of the new political center of the empire. Due to its strategic position on the important east-west trade route, the Eastern Roman Empire became very wealthy enough to begin entertaining ambitions of expansion. Also, the Western Roman Empire had collapsed in 476 AD, just 25 years prior to the birth of Belisarius. So, the Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, viewed the lost western provinces as rightfully theirs, as something to be reclaimed. And when it came to Emperor Justinian I, he viewed the reunification of the Roman Empire under his Christian rule as a divine mission, one that he would pursue for the entirety of his reign. Enter Belisarius. Who was Belisarius? He was born around 500 AD in the fortified town of Germain, located in modern-day southwestern Bulgaria. The family he was born into was of either Illyrian or Thracian descent, but most importantly, Latin was his mother tongue, a characteristic that certainly helped him in his career. Joining the army as a young man, he came to the attention of Justin and the future emperor Justinian as an innovative and unorthodox officer, being granted permission by the emperor to form a special bodyguard unit. Now, it's important to note here that Belisarius is a provincial being given charge of his own private regiment of soldiers, amounting to a single bandon of 300 men. These were the Bucellarii, which translates as the biscuit eaters, but would translate more properly today as the hardtack eaters, a reference to their campaign rations. By being privately funded, the Bucellarii tended to be better equipped and skilled than the regular comitatenses and limitanae due to being proto-private contractors. The Bucellarii were a cost-saving measure by the imperial treasury, and the head of the unit, in this case Belisarius, would be expected to pay the men's salaries out of his own pocket. These would be initially funded by a patron, namely in this case Empress Theodora, since a young officer like Belisarius wouldn't have the money to outfit a significant body of men. Belisarius took this opportunity to form a unit that would be the core of his later armies. Belisarius would prove to be innovative in this instance by choosing to make his Bucellarii a cavalry unit, recognizing the preeminence and emerging dominance of heavy cavalry on the Dark Age battlefield. He designed them to be able to tackle a variety of foes and circumstances, being armed with lances, the powerful Hunnish composite bows which they were trained to use at the gallop, weighted throwing darts they'd attach to the front of their saddle, and finally the spatha, the long sword that succeeded the gladius, short sword, famed for its use by the Roman legions. They were fully armored with helmet, cuirass, greaves on their shins, and vambraces protecting their lower arms. These soldiers were the melding together of Rome's chief enemies, the Gothic heavy cavalryman and the Hunnic horse archer, producing a versatile, forward-thinking, and deadly soldier. We do not know exactly how Belisarius set about training these men, but we can infer from the writings of the earlier Arian and the later Emperor Maurice that the men were meticulously trained, being taught how to vault onto the horse in full armor, how to loose arrows and darts at the gallop, how to deploy within or independently from an army, how to form up as either shock cavalry or as skirmishers, among other formations. Through this thorough training, the horseman would be a skilled one, capable of switching between his different roles repeatedly as the situation demanded. Famously, Belisarius would be held in high esteem by the men who served under him, especially those who had the privilege of being in his personal Bucellarii regiment. One of the ways he won their loyalty was through his generosity and justice in dealing with them. When a soldier lost a horse, or his armor was damaged, or a weapon was broken, Belisarius would swiftly replace it at his own expense. He sought to elevate men who proved worthy of it, and to reward acts of valor. Failure was not final, always giving the men a chance to redeem themselves. Importantly, Belisarius was also a strict disciplinarian. Crime, especially robbery, looting, rape, or any other of the crimes typical of soldiers, were swiftly punished, even with the death penalty. The young Belisarius was given the chance to put his unit to the test in 525 AD. Being around 25 years of age, this would be an important testing ground for Belisarius. Together, Belisarius and his men would launch a raid across the Danube, directed at the barbarian Gepids. The raid proved to be highly successful, so much so that Belisarius was allowed to expand the size of his Bucellarii from 300 men to 1,500. Belisarius was now in command of a versatile and deadly band of men that followed him across his many campaigns. After the baptism by fire against the Gepids, Belisarius and his Bucellarii were deployed to the east against Constantinople's mortal foe, the Sassanids. This concludes Episode 1 of the Armed Historian History for the Future series. We will return to Belisarius in the next episode and his accomplishments in the east. Thank you for listening.